Hi, marketers. This is Dots, and welcome to the Marketing Leadership Podcast. With me here is Jeff Large, CEO and founder at Come Alive. We will be helping you if you're struggling on your way to having a B2B podcast that wants to win, that wants to stay at the top, that wants to deliver the goods for your business. I know you guys are ready, so let's strap in. Jeff, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Really an honor to have you and to discuss, especially B2B podcasting, which I also got, I know a thing or two about. So, but before then, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself, your background? Every podcast folk I've spoken to always have a unique background. So let's hear
Yeah,
yours.
geez. When I was a little boy, no, I think the short of it is my formal background's education, just shy of my master's in language arts, and so I used to teach for a long time. I left a while ago, started my agency, I think in 2014. Did web dev at first, got sick of it, offboarded all those clients, switched over to podcasting, and haven't looked back since. And then we got a lot of other stuff going on, kind of family wise, and different things, lots of different hobbies and whatnot. But this is kind of the space that I've been sitting in for the last while, and it's done us well.
Yeah, absolutely. You just getting started as well. We haven't reached the peak of what they call the division of innovation. So I got in very late, but never late than never. I'll be better late than never, as they would say. So,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
always like the whole. It would have been better if you started X years ago, and then the next best time is now. So don't feel bad at all.
yeah, absolutely. And hopefully, if you're on the podcast today, you will be inspired to start now, especially B2B podcasting. So we'll see how that goes. So into the topic, business goals. I was saying that before, using podcasts as a tool to achieve business goals. There are a couple of them out there. I would assume that most of the ones you already know are from a knowledge perspective, are accessible through a Google search. So I want to respect the time of everyone on this pod. But the one I'm really curious about is sales generation. Um, how did podcast suddenly become a tool, a marketing tool to generate eventual sales? Tell me about that through your experience.
Yeah, so it's kind of a hard one because, like you said, there's so many different things that you can do. And ultimately, I think that's probably the biggest takeaway for somebody who's considering starting a podcast is what does success look like? Like, where do you
Mm.
want it to go? Because sometimes it's sales, sometimes it's relationships. There's a variety of different things. Now, what we've experienced on the sales front, at least, the other thing I maybe want to clarify too, as I was looking at some of the original questions, is the idea between leads and sales, and I would almost view those as two different intents. If you make a podcast that's kind of for lead generation versus if you make a podcast that's supposed to help with sales,
Mm.
and we even just recently wrote an article, um, whether you want to call it a marketing funnel or kind of the levels of awareness within marketing, you can build shows at times that uh, they focus more on the lower end of that funnel or further down through the awareness. And so examples that come to mind for me is I used to run a personal show, and on the kind of the top of the funnel, terrible. Like, it was named after me. It wasn't very clear in terms of its offering and that type of a thing. But the relationships and the conversations I was able to build with the people that I had on the show would oftentimes, even just unintentionally, turn into partnerships or
Mhm.
sales or whatever it is, have you, those types of things. I think of another client, again, their main offering was they did, I forget how many they did throughout the year, but several different events, like live training events in the nonprofit space. And their show highlighted like a lot of their own skills, talked to the people that they've worked with, and it was through their listeners being able to kind of get a real impression of like, oh, this is sort of a taster of what I'm going to get. They'd convert over and end up, say, buying into their courses or resources, actually attending their live events and those types of things. And so it's such a massive topic. It's kind of hard for me to get into in the details here, but just holistically, or if I was going to summarize it briefly, I'd be thinking about how can you leverage your show on more of that personal angle, on more of that, not trying to appeal to the masses, but appealing to very specific people, whether it's the people you invite onto the show or the people that you know are going to be listening to the show.
So yeah, like first thing I love that I would like to pick up on. We just had a conversation with a guest, and she said, or we both agree that for whether it's leads or sales, and you're right about the distinction there. Um, who are you looking to capture? Are you looking to capture the guests as that potential lead or potential sale? Are you looking to capture the listeners or viewers as that potential, lead or sale? We have worked with a few enterprises that are focusing on listeners to drive product adoption of a certain product line. And we've seen a bunch of people who use guests as well. Uh, we've seen a few people that have tried to combine both, which is way harder than people think. You're absolutely right. This is not the episode to break things down, but you know, whatever it is, as a strategist, I'll be very biased to say you need to have strategy. It's important to figure out what your own, maturity funnel is for a podcast and how that ties to everything. And how that ties into the decision making process.
Mm.
It's a little bit different from the marketing funnel on the B2B side. It's a decision making funnel, for your product or offering or product line or brand. So that's thanks for mentioning those important aspects. I know you work with C-level executives, which is awesome. Um, but what is not awesome is sometimes, things can get very busy, especially on their end. Things can get very messy in between you two, and things can get very slow, I dare say, on their end. Uh,
Yep.
so, I will say this, I will not say the brand, but the client eventually churned, but for 6 months, we're just going back and forth on a logo. This was a very big enterprise US company. But it was clear that they probably made a mistake venturing into podcasting in the first place. And that was the most extreme version of it. So, but again, I'm not saying you have a silver bullet to everything, but I think you've solved it to a point. So, how can marketers, especially the junior ones who are really especially those who are sort of working on everything, the logistics, how do you coach them to help streamline a podcast flow so it moves well, the production is quality, executive level
Mhm.
quality, especially internally, when I mean internally on the brand side, so that they can help you do your own job better?
Yeah. So if let me clarify. Is the advice that you're looking for somebody who's internal to the company and they're in charge of running the show, or is it
You
somebody who's bringing a show from the outside to the company?
know, somebody the podcast has been approved already to run,
Got it.
and there's just some, I don't know, senior manager or director, uh, you know, working on the logistics and the back and forth and all that stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So if I was giving advice to somebody in that role that you're senior, you're just tasked with this all of a sudden falls in your wheelhouse. You really got to take. I mean, it's like so much more of like a time management and a skill evaluation than it is like a podcast thing, to be honest. And
Mm,
I would look at it in terms of like, what is your team capable of doing, period. And
okay.
be very realistic about it. Because like the first thing is you're probably, if you have little to no experience in podcasting, you're going to underestimate how much work it actually is. That's like the first thing out of the gate. The second thing is that you could probably literally outsource everything. So we have some of our clients that come to us and they have the idea and the talent who they want to be the host and they want help with everything else. And
Yeah.
then we have some of our clients who literally just come to us with the idea and then we outsource everything or our team handles everything. And we even had some teams that think they have the bandwidth and capacity where there's one team we worked with in the past. They had an in-house proper studio with proper engineers that were doing their own thing, but they prioritized their clients. Like the clients were first. And so all of their internal work and content got pushed to the back burner.
Mm,
Or one of our other recent clients had a background in audio, like had his own recording studio and a kind of in a former life and had the capacity or had the knowledge rather to do this, but did not have the time to do it. And so it's
uh,
being very realistic of like, what is actually available, what are you responsible for? And to me, just even from all the research we've done and talking with our clients, it always comes down to time and expertise. And don't kid yourself, if those don't exist, either one of them, and even honestly, a lot, the biggest one being time, even if you have the expertise, do you realistically have the time? And then it's just a matter of putting in a proper kind of something to help. And usually the solutions there are either you kind of one off segments of it, like we definitely want an editor, or we definitely want a producer to do XYZ, or we need somebody to handle all of our promotional content. Or you just bring in a team like mine who literally does take it from start to finish, and kind of for like a proper full service type solution to it. So now
Mm.
again, short answer on that one, but that's what I'd be looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say the barrier to entry is very low. I think we hear you. And I will also add that the barrier to entry is very low because some might think, yeah, it's going to cost quite a bit. Let's do everything in-house. But don't forget that if you are, especially if you are on the enterprise or mid-sized part of the business, you're not only handling the podcast, you're handling other things. You're probably handling internal communications, you're handling so many other things, event marketing,
Mhm.
and some of those things that are taking your time. So why not let a professional do it? Even within content allies and other podcasting agencies, there's always, I would say, you know, compared to other marketing agencies, I think the biggest there's more love in the podcasting world than in any other marketing sphere because every podcast agency is working with each other. Oh, I learned you guys can do this. Can you help us with it? Or we don't do this. We thought we could send you a referral. So if that is happening at this level, even between agencies, then I don't see why brands cannot just let the professionals do their jobs. A lot of steps to get a podcast done.
Yeah.
We use process streets, and sometimes when I look at the dashboard and look at the things going on there, you scream. So um, it's a lot that goes on to make a podcast worthy. It's really a very, very good podcast. Some C-level guys who want like an executive, like a narrative show as well, which is even more difficult to do.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah,
uh,
people don't get it. Like, I mean, it very literally is like you're saying, like, at the most absolute bare bones level, you record something live and you push it out. But most of the time, if you're not editing or touching it up, like, you're doing yourself a disservice and you're doing your listener a disservice. Where on the other end of the spectrum, I mean, you're talking like, it sounds nuts, but it's like an easy 50 plus hours or more on a narrative type of show where it's like you're taking, like, we broke one of ours down recently. We have one that we produced called At the Brink, and it's all about like the threat of nuclear issues. And there was like I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was something like 12 plus people involved in the actual production. We had maybe like 8 hours worth of 8 different guests of interviews, and we're distilling all of that down into like maybe a 45-minute episode and writing custom music. And it's just nuts. Like when you actually break it down. And the thing that is crazy that people underestimate is usually the better the show is, like, the more easy it feels, like, "Oh, I could do that," and then you
yeah,
actually start to get into it, and you're like, "What is happening? This is
no,
crazy."
no. It's a lot. I will just we'll leave it there. But yeah, it's quite a lot. At the end of the show, we'll let you know where you can find Jeff, so you can give you a bit of a discovery on what actually happens behind the scenes. But yeah, it's quite a lot. And the other thing that is not easy to do internally, I would argue, and this is not me trying to like project anything. At the end of the day, it's your decision, but you find out quick enough is getting better consumption rates on your episode, getting better retention on your episode, as they will say it in YouTube world. Um, you've done a lot to help many podcasts hit up to 95%. I would argue that not all functions there, but again, it depends on the market. But 95 is pretty awesome. You will be shocked that a lot of episode podcasts in the B2B space even struggle to do under 50%. So I think there's a lot to learn from your thoughts on how in general, we can look at audience retention, how brands can, even I guess welcome ideas from, their marketing teams or consultants or CMOs. on how you can get better retention on their episodes, not just about their own ideas, but what maybe is backed by data, qualitative,
Mhm.
quantitative, backed by expert opinion as well, and all that stuff. So how do you navigate that? I want to believe that there are times where brands have to agree with you to make difficult decisions on getting episodes that engage better. And then when they see the result, they're like, yeah, Jeff is a man, man. So tell us about that. Tell us about the successes around consumption rates.
Yeah, so I think the high retention rate, just in general, is you like if we open this up to sort of like metrics, like if what matters for a podcast. De facto for a long time, and it to me being in the space, everybody that's in the space is finally kind of going like, hey, it's not just downloads, like, and then so it seems to be trickling outwards, and more people are beginning to realize that. But things
Yeah.
like retention, people coming back to listen, like episode to episode. Those are the things that I personally care about because then it's more of a test of like, yes, our message is working. Like people are sticking around to listen to the whole thing, and people are coming back over and over again to hear what I have to say next, which is kind of exciting. And then to do that, there's sort of the tried and true things that it just kind of happens. If you're doing it well, it'll happen over time with consistency and quality and like those kind of like no brainers or what should just feel like table stakes.
Yeah.
And then when I was kind of thinking about this question before the interview of what happens, um, part of it I think is the alignment of what you're attempting to accomplish and what you're actually doing. And so
Yeah.
one of the things is like we kind of jumped, say, for example, to the promotional piece, or like that's come up a couple times now. But what you need to understand is that you could do all the marketing and promotion in the world. If your foundational idea is off or misaligned or wrong, it doesn't matter. And it's
Yeah.
part of the reason that we've sort of really fell into this full service model is because we've had people come to us with a show, but if the show's not very good, like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I market it or whatever to it. Like we need to make sure that the baseline is right.
Yeah.
There's another piece too that I was just having a conversation with one of our longest running clients, and his stats. It's so much fun to look at his stuff. He's working in the real estate, kind of commercial real estate space.
Mhm.
His episodes break like all traditional advice because they're over an hour. They're usually hour 15, hour 30, and he's looking at 91% or higher in terms of retention. That 91% of the audience, and I think he's at like 1.6 million downloads or something right now. And so it's like he's getting a hefty amount of downloads per episode. And majority of them are listening to about 75, if not 100% of the episode, which is just kind of wild to me. But part of that is that he's ridiculously intentional. Like he's
Mhm.
figured out his craft. He's no novice. He's got over 100 episodes in. I think coming up on 200 episodes now. Cares passionately about where he's going, who he's interviewing, why he's interviewing them. His
Yeah.
interview style has changed more to an arc versus just like a back and forth or like tell me about your history. Okay, cool. Why are you interesting? That's great. Where can I find you? Like that type of stuff. Like it actually has a story arc to it. And
Yeah.
he's figured out himself as talent or as an interviewer. So all of this to say that there are a lot of factors. Some will
Yeah.
naturally come if you do this well and you do it over time, but it's really I can't stress enough the know where you're going, know your goals and what you want to accomplish, have an understanding of who you're talking to and what the show needs to be successful, and then figure out the best ways that you can to own it, to care about what you're doing. Don't just show up, crank out interviews or anything. I mean, this is an extension of you, your brand. This is an
Yeah.
extension of you, your company.
Yeah.
And when all of those things start to mesh together, um, things like retention happen.
Yeah. And sometimes I would think about would you listen to this episode? I think is the question I often ask myself. I listen to every episode that goes live. As of this point of this recording, we've had over 40 live out of the 200 plus. And yeah, that's always the question. And whenever you listen to an episode, you find some things that are wrong. One of the few things that we had was somehow we had three sponsor plugs in the episode, especially the audio version. Too much. Just cut everything to one and let that one be close to the end. I have a policy that is called listener value guarantee. And that says if you listen to 3 episodes and nobody answers a question or asks a question, in my case being the host, that says, yeah, no one has actually asked me that, or good question, interesting question, feel free to go to another podcast. Because we're putting a lot of work into the briefs. We do make briefs if you're listening or watching. We don't read it. We have a discussion like we're at a pub talking about something serious. But there's so much research into the questions themselves as well, and there's so much research into uh, you know, I'm personally big on getting straight to the point too. Like, let's just get straight to the point. I've seen episodes whereby for like 3, 5 minutes, they haven't even started at all. They are
Mhm.
summarizing the episode. They are, saying a couple of things, maybe a few sponsor stuff. Again, depends on the niche. um in B2B. I would guess if you have a very niche podcast like medical devices, for example, or open access for publishers, then people will have no choice than to listen all through. But those places are also getting bigger too, and they are getting more competitive. So it's figuring out. I think I like what you said in terms of own your podcast. So I've seen brands that really pay a lot of attention to their podcast. Sometimes they get too far, and we're like, man, what's the break with this guy or with this guy? But it's good. It's good. It's good that they own the podcast. It's good that they take it personal. It's good that they're not just making it a means to drive counts for downloads that they can then use in their uh you know in their appraisals to get bonuses. No, it's something that is supposed to make real true impact on their market. Uh,
Mhm.
Again, what we are giving you may not be necessarily like a cookie clutter way to get consumption rates. Of course, there are ways to measure this now. I will use co-host as our hosting, and they've been able to figure out consumption rates on not just Apple but also on Spotify somehow. So you can look at that through both channels, and hopefully YouTube gets integrated into hostings too. But even with that, the solution is not often a cookie clutter solution. It's just looking at your creative strategy and fine tuning that. I have one more question for you, but we have a furnace we would like to throw you into called the Dots Rapid Fire. And but I know you'll be fine. When we come back from quick break, we'll get into that, and then I will ask you the last question. I often leave the best for the last, and if you're here and you're about to turn off, let me tell you what I'm about to ask now. I'm about to ask, all well and good, how do we get started? So, um, Jeff has got it all figured out. You need to listen to how to get started now. So don't miss it. We'll be right back in a couple of seconds. Guys, welcome back. So like I said, the Dots Rapid Fire. Jeff is a witness in a marketing court of law. He's going to answer 3 questions and say the truth and nothing but the truth. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, good. The first one is, what is your favorite marketing metric apart from sales or revenue?
I was would go with I like leading indicators. Well, just answer like broadly. So, for example, one thing we did, we got so many leads coming last year, and I looked at all of our marketing activities, and I was like, well, I want 3 times that coming in this year, and so we're doing 3 times those activities that we know that work. And so it's really easy to look at lagging indicators of like, oh, this happened after the fact, or this happened after the fact, but through some of the business frameworks and things that I've been using over the last couple of years, just learning how to identify the leading indicators and then leverage those has been super helpful for us as a business.
I like that. And in terms of leading indicators, I would say, even though he hasn't said it, that Jeff not only just uses counts in terms of doubling the count of leads. He also uses averages, which is why he's focusing on channels that have delivered the higher conversion rates. Am I right or am I right, Jeff?
You are right.
Okay. Second question. How long do you use social media every day for work?
I hate social media and I would use it 0 if I could,
It was
but
work.
my team continues to harass me and badger me, and so I use it probably 30 minutes to maybe 45, primarily to do outreach. So I have
You
short lists of every day of people that their accounts that I actually am friends with or I actually enjoy. And then
Mm,
I'll kind of find the post or posts that resonate with me that I actually have something to say about, and then I'll make comments on them.
mm,
And then the other part of it where I used to write and post daily. Um, and I still write a ton, but I've actually recently outsourced a lot of that. And so I have somebody on my team that's carrying that for me now. And based on even honestly, we'll pull this interview and she'll probably grab a bunch of awesome stuff from it. So it's actually my voice and everything still, but
yeah.
yeah, I hate social. So any amount is too much.
I know, I know. But it's good that you still got a presence because we don't have many B2B podcasting folks.
It
People
feels like there's so many. Like when you're in the space, it
they're
feels like it's so.
podcasting
Yeah,
is
like
very
I talked
it's
to
very
other
wide.
people and they're like, "You do what?" And then like my day-to-day life, I'm like, "There's so many of us." So it's weird, but yeah, I'm sticking it out for now. Eventually I will disappear into the woods, but right now we have to keep working and doing our thing. So you got a little bit of time left with me still.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, B2B podcasting is just very specific. It's a different world. Podcasting in general, yes. And many people will not say this, but many people might say they are B2B podcasters, but what they truly do is they do all podcasting, including B2C. But when you're like B2B, that's with B2B, then it's often special. So great to see your voice there out in the world. Okay. Last question. What is your favorite marketing quote?
Okay. I don't have a marketing quote per se, but the one that I reference a lot is actually it's a C.S. Lewis quote, and he's talking about the debate between faith and works. And he
Yep.
says, regarding the debate between faith and works, it's like asking which blade on a pair of scissors is more important. And I reference that a lot because there's so many times, just even in my what feels like short time as a marketer, as kind of my marketing hat that I have to wear, where we'll debate like, oh, this is the most important thing, or this is the most important thing, or this is the most important thing. And there is no silver bullet, like you said. Like
Yeah,
I've learned that there isn't just one right way. I've seen so many crazy things work that like shouldn't work, but they do.
yeah.
And so it's just that quote in particular is always a reminder for me to kind of live in the tension. And so when you have these what seem to be opposite ideas, that maybe it's a both and instead of an either or. And so that's what I try to embrace more as I continue to age.
I love that. I when we started with I believe was 9 questions. Now we have 4 questions. And I was asking myself, are we still able to discuss for maybe 25, 30 minutes with the same 4 questions? And I'm like, yeah, let's just try it out. What it has done, very unpopular, but what it has done for me is removed CNN back and forth style interview and brought it into a discussion phase, whereby after all the 4 questions are out of the way, I can take pawns, I can spin up from your responses, my own thoughts. I can spin up additional questions from my own thoughts. And that brings in the originality that podcasts these days need for all the right KPIs to work. So that's just an example. Coming from my background, really don't give a damn of whatever happens or whatever doesn't happen. I mean, I'm a man of faith myself, but that's not even the issue. The issue is just we just try stuff. We just do it.
I mean, I would even like I'd say one of your future episodes, try not writing a single question or do different things like that. Like we had a series that we did recently where my team spent, I don't even know how long they spent writing a whole bunch of questions for me and I was primary interviewer for it. And I found once I got into the interviews, I'm like, I'm not using these at all. And so we just like even say take one of your future episodes, write down like a more of a statement. Like if you've ever read the book, Stop Asking Questions by Andrew Warner. That's a
No.
super fun read as a host or as a interviewer. That one's
Ah,
worth checking out. But just have like
okay.
an objective of like, all right, tell me about this, and then just let that be the
Well,
only thing
that
you
was
have
good the
planned
time.
for the 25 minutes and see where it goes and chase your own curiosity. It's like it's so much fun to just try new things like that and to push back against the norms or what is supposed to be best practice or whatever. Like you can discover a lot.
Yeah, what is actually going to happen is we are going to do three questions, and my thinking there is you have one question for 10 minutes for one question, so we go up the tangent, all the rabbit holes in the world, and I get to make as much jokes as I can find, out of those as well. So that will definitely happen, and I think it will even be great from an engagement perspective. So yeah, this is not a silver bullet podcast. Work use whatever works for you. Life is not a silver bullet. um Marketing is not a silver bullet. Everybody's talking about AI these days. AI this, AI that. I'm a strategist, so I still use a lot of my own skills to do stuff. Yeah, I use the AI sometimes, but not all the time, so I don't find myself overly dependent on that. But let's be careful of what they call the idea of the week. Thanks. Great quote, by the way. Great quote. Okay, so the last question is time. Guys, it is time. Get your pens, get your notepad. It is time. We want to launch a podcast, Jeff. We're ready to go. We're ready to go with this B2B world, ready to generate demand. We're ready to, use marketing leaders or brand leaders or whatnot. Can you tell us how that works? You have like a four-step system for this. Again, it doesn't have to be four-step exactly, but just makes sense to have that in concept. What are the steps? How do they work together? And how can that get us to where we want to be over time?
Okay. I'm going to answer this two ways because it's even just based on the quote I just said, it's easy to go on either angle. On one hand, it's probably easier than ever to start a podcast. The accessibility with what we have in terms of the quality, it's just like ridiculous. Even if I've been a musician for 20 something years now, and the what equipment can do nowadays, what software can do nowadays, and even what you just mentioned, what AI is able to help us do as another tool. The barrier to entry is ridiculously low to have a really, really great sounding show.
Mhm.
But the thing you got to ask yourself is, even just because it sounds good, is it worth listening to? On the other end of the spectrum is you could worry about this all day long and strategize till your heart's content and never actually launch anything. And so it's finding somewhere in the middle of those 2 points of what's going to be the best for you. The way that we function is we break down any of what these processes into 4 parts. We look at it from planning, production, promotion, and tracking the progress. Planning is going to cover everything that we've been talking about in terms of what is the goal for the show, how much of it is you think about some of like the dials. If you think of like a guitar pedal, for example, and
Mm.
you tweak in the tone or whatever it is, where one dial might be what does the show need to do for you, what does the show need to do for your audience, what does the show need to do for your company, and
Yeah.
depending on those goals that you're shooting for, you tweak the dials appropriately. Who are you talking to? What is it that you want to accomplish macro in terms of a season? What is it that you want to accomplish? Like, what are all the baby steps you'll need to take to get that there? Ask yourself questions like, how do I want my listener to feel by the end of this episode, by the end of this season? There's all of these things you're figuring out. You're identifying your guests, organizing, lining it all up. Production is what most people think of when you think about podcasting. That's all the editing, the interviews, the recording, kind of all the technical stuff that goes along with it.
Yeah.
Again, that's a lot more accessible than it used to be. That said, if you're not an editor and you don't really have a desire to edit, don't edit. Like, don't kid yourself. Like, there's so many things that just really great people out there to offload to. So leverage that as much as possible. So you're kind of doing your most important tasks and you're letting other people do theirs.
Yeah.
Promotion, again, it starts at the planning phase, but promotion, there's so many different things you can do from the owned and paid and
And
kind of other type things that you're able to do there. So
mm,
plenty of routine and things that you could dive into that again we just unfortunately just don't have time for. And then the
Yeah.
one that I think gets overlooked a lot is actually tracking your progress. And that's one that we've kind of found a cadence of. We look at things in pretty heavy detail about every quarter. We're able to go through all the numbers and things that are available on multiple platforms from our web or from not the web host, but the audio host to what Spotify gives us, Apple gives us, other tools will give us, Chartable, like all the different things that you can
Yeah.
leverage. And then
Yeah.
more anecdotally too, from kind of what's happening behind the scenes, where a lot of the time, like our client would have that information. If you are the company, you would have that information, be able to see what people are doing on your pages,
Yeah.
within your email, how they're responding there, all of those things. And then
Yeah.
finally, just the human element of what do we know is working? What are we curious about? And what do we need to tweak for the next round of episodes that are coming? And so, again, very broad sweep. But those are the four ways that we work with any of our clients and how we can really truly evaluate a podcast and see if it's doing what it's supposed to be doing or not.
So on the rabbit hole time, on the tracking with step 4, do you think hosts can do a better job on how they track, how they consolidate data? My opinion, um, casted co-hosts are probably one of the best out there in terms of just trying to mash as much data as possible. Casted will try to say, oh, we can do some CRM integration. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, um, and things like that. But in general, do you think podcast hosts can do a better job at, you know, uh, just giving us data? For example, I don't see why Lipsyn today cannot measure things like plays and go beyond downloads. I don't see why they can't measure things like 1 minute listens, even if that's the bare minimum they can do.
Mhm.
We do that custom through Listen Network, but why can't hosts, go through that level of detail? Why can more hosts, measure consumption rates and things like that? Like I said, I'm a strategist. I do QBRs for B2B podcasts, maybe 2, 3 a week. And it's sometimes very frustrating, depending on the
Mhm.
hosting platform or what data you have available to access. So, if you need to rant and give some of our hostings a tap on the head for them to wake up, what would that be in terms of analytics?
Man, okay. So to clarify, just to make sure I hear you, but to clarify, because I think it gets confused a lot. We're talking host, not in
Mm.
terms of the speaker like yourself, but in
No,
terms of the
podcast host,
media. Yeah, the
media,
podcast host, the media
good,
host.
good
What can they
catch.
do
Yeah,
better?
yeah.
The thing that we've found is this goes back into the planning of depending on what you want to know, different hosts are just equipped to do different things better. And like you said, co-hosts has really hit the B2B marketer angle of how much data can we provide that's relevant and useful to our people. Most of my podcasts are hosted over on Megaphone. Megaphone does certain things like dynamic ad placement and some other features and just really being pretty bulletproof. I think they've gone down once in the entire time that I've used them, or they're offline like temporarily for a couple hours, but otherwise they do certain things really, really well. And then
Mm.
there's certain things that requests I make, and I'm like, how do you not have this feature? Like, how does this not exist? This is nuts to me. We have one that's like Blueberry does a ton of different analytics, and they're pretty intentional about what they're doing there. And there's so many different ones, and like again, pros and cons of each.
Yeah,
And then even as the
doesn't know.
space grows, and like I've watched companies that I really used to love get acquired and then all of a sudden fall off. And so it's like I'm not gonna put anybody
Yeah,
on blast right
that's
now, but
the Chartable got acquired and then they dumped B2B analytics. But moving on.
hey man, I'm, I'm gonna keep my hands clean of this for now. Don't kill the
Yeah,
messenger.
yeah, actually,
But
don't kill them.
definitely there's like if you're familiar with the space, crazy stuff happens all the time. And so it's like do your homework, think about what is going to be most useful for you, because what's most useful for your show might not be for Steve or Joanna or whoever down the street. So
Yeah.
figure that out and understand the different hosts has strengths and weaknesses. And certainly, the I think maybe the last thing to think about too is the nature of a podcast. It's so good for a listener. It
Mm.
has you're just basically free reign, complete access. You can interact with it however you want to, whether you want to go watch it on YouTube or listen from whatever player you choose and those types of things. Where you
Yeah.
take a medium like video and it's like, of course, YouTube's going to care about YouTube video. LinkedIn's going to only care about uploading natively to LinkedIn
Yeah.
and so on, the rest of the platforms, where with podcasting, you get to do what you want. But with that, on our side, for the people who care about what's actually going on, it makes our lives really difficult. So I think the short of it is stuff's moving fast. I'm watching even some of the stuff that say Dan over at Bumper released recently, and like different tools and things that are happening, and AI is kind of up in the game, and you got co-hosts like you were saying pioneering a lot of different stuff, and it's just interesting. So I don't have a great answer there. It's a sort of a
Mhm.
long-winded way of saying I don't know. But I'm watching, like I'm certainly watching, and I'm interested, and it'd be fun to figure out the tension on that one of how can we leave podcasting alone that people can interact with it however they want to still, because I value that a lot, almost probably more so. But then
Mm.
at the same time, where can we improve on the back end? How can we provide concrete information that's actually useful for our clients, actually useful for us as podcast hosts? We're at an interesting time, and I don't usually like to make predictions, but it seems like we're moving in a good direction with it all.
Yeah, absolutely. I would make two predictions before we close. And one is Meta is going to bring back their podcasts. I don't know what happened. They had it before in 2021 and it was gone afterwards. They still have the materials live out there. I also predict that LinkedIn is going to have some sort of a podcast engine. They already do live. So it's just, plugging in the podcasting bit. Some have predicted that Spotify might get acquired. I don't know about that. But when looking at the top tech companies in the world, and if not they have podcasts, Meta and LinkedIn seems to be the ones that need to like catch up in the game, and it's either they acquire or they start up their own stuff. And then we'll see what happens from there at the back end. Like somebody said in one of our episodes, the RSS was marketings or brands or technologies, one of the biggest inventions ever made, but now it's failing. So it's that we need to reinvent RSS or look for a different model that allows us to get things to become very robust. But again, another title for another day. But thanks so much for this. I've had a lot of podcast episodes, but this one feels like it's the first time, and that always feels very good. So thanks so much for your insight. Thanks so much for your wisdom. Where can people follow you, especially B2B marketers in general?
Yeah. If you want to learn more about my company, it's just comealivecreative.com. And then if you want to interact with me specifically, I am a human. Like I'm not using AI or anything yet. And even though I do have help posting, I will respond. LinkedIn is the best place. You can just search Jeff Large. I have a little microphone in front of my name. So that's the easiest way.
Makes sense. Guys, this is how we do it on the episode. Just look at more. It's on my website, dotslovesmarketing.com. We are looking to roll them out as fast as possible. They are all super quality, I dare say PhD level episodes too. So hopefully you're able to learn a lot from them as well. Go to Apple, Spotify, or YouTube if you want to subscribe and never miss a new episode. Just search Marketing Leadership. You'll see me, I'm Sakimbo, well shaped there somewhere. I'd like to thank Des Creek, Content Allies, and Listen Network for their support. Till next time, connect dots.
Thank you for listening to the Marketing Leadership Podcast, brought to you by Dots Loves Marketing. There will be links to any resources mentioned in today's show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star review and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode.